Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen many things during her 15 years as a xenobiologist on the frontier planet of Kepler 442b, but nothing had prepared her for the sight that awaited her in the crystalline caverns beneath Mount Serenity. The distress call had come through the emergency channels at 0300 hours, transmitted in a complex mixture of electromagnetic pulses and harmonic frequencies that their translation systems barely recognized as language. The expedition team consisted of Elena, 2 security officers, and Commander Zhang Wei from the Colonial Defense Force. They had expected perhaps a mining accident or geological instability. What they found instead defied every protocol in the Colonial Handbook. The cavern stretched before them like a cathedral of living crystal, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that cast dancing shadows across surfaces smooth as glass. The air hummed with an energy that made their hair stand on end, and the temperature readings on their suits fluctuated wildly between freezing and scorching with each step forward. But it was the creature at the center of the cavern that stopped them dead in their tracks. She was magnificent and terrible, a being of such alien beauty that Elena's scientific mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. The dragon stood nearly 30 feet tall, her scales shifting through spectrums of color that had no names in human language. Her wings, folded against her serpentine body, seemed to contain entire galaxies within their membrane, stars twinkling and dying in patterns that hurt to look at directly. And she was weeping. The sound that emerged from her throat was like the death song of a star, a harmony so profound and mournful that it resonated in their very bones. Crystalline tears the size of Elena's fist fell from eyes that burned with the intensity of twin suns, each droplet creating small explosions of light where it struck the cavern floor. Cradled against her massive chest, barely visible against her cosmic scales, was something that made Elena's heart clench with recognition despite its alien nature. A hatchling, no larger than a house cat, its own scales dim and flickering like a dying ember. Even from 50 meters away, Elena could see the labored rise and fall of its tiny chest, could hear the wheeze in its breathing that spoke of lungs filled with fluid. The mother dragon's great head turned toward them, and Elena found herself looking into eyes that held intelligence older than human civilization. There was pain there, yes, but also something else. Hope, perhaps, or desperation so complete it had transformed into something resembling faith. Commander Zhang's hand moved toward his weapon, but Elena caught his wrist before he could draw it. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the comm system. "She's not threatening us. She's asking for help." The dragon spoke then, her voice like the rumble of tectonic plates shifting, words in a language that predated human speech by millions of years. But somehow, impossibly, Elena understood. Not the words themselves, but the meaning behind them, transmitted directly into her mind through methods that made her training in xenolinguistics seem like finger painting. "My child dies," the dragon said, and the weight of those 3 words nearly brought Elena to her knees. "The sickness takes her light. I have called to the deep places, to the star singers and the void walkers, but none answer. Only you come. Only the young ones, the quick-lived sparks who burn so bright and brief." Elena stepped forward, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from her team. Her scanner was already active, its sensors reaching out to analyze the electromagnetic patterns surrounding the dying hatchling. What she saw made her gasp. The creature's entire cellular structure was breaking down at a molecular level, its exotic matter composition destabilizing in ways that defied everything Elena knew about biology. But there was something else, something her scanner was picking up that made her pulse race with possibility. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with excitement and fear, "I need you to contact the medical bay immediately. Tell Dr. Ramirez to prepare a quarantine unit and have him stand by for emergency xenobiological protocols." "Elena," Zhang's voice crackled through the comm, "we don't even know what that thing is. It could be carrying diseases that could wipe out the entire colony." Elena turned to look at him, and he stepped back involuntarily at the intensity in her eyes. "Then, we'd better make sure it doesn't die, hadn't we?" The dragon had been watching this exchange with those ancient, burning eyes. Now she spoke again, and Elena felt the words settle into her mind like lead weights. "You are the healers among your kind," the dragon said. "I sense it in your electromagnetic signature, in the quantum resonance of your thoughts. My daughter's sickness is not of the body alone, but of the very forces that bind matter to energy. Your people, for all their brevity, have learned to manipulate these forces in ways that even we, the firstborn children of stars, have not mastered. Elena's mind raced. The dragon was right about human medical technology. Over the past 500 years, humanity had developed techniques for cellular regeneration and quantum-level genetic manipulation that were considered impossible by the standards of most galactic civilizations. But those techniques had only ever been tested on human physiology and a handful of Earth-based organisms. The radiation signatures, Elena said suddenly, pieces of the puzzle clicking together in her mind. Your daughter isn't dying of disease. She's dying of incompatible energy exposure. Something has disrupted her quantum coherence patterns. The dragon's eyes widened, and for a moment the cavern blazed with light as her emotional state affected the bioluminescent crystals around them. You understand, she whispered, and there was wonder in her voice. In all the cycles of my existence, across all the worlds where I have walked between stars, none have comprehended the true nature of our being so quickly. Elena was already moving, her medical kit in her hands as she approached the massive creature. Behind her, she could hear Jean coordinating with the medical team back at the colony, his voice tight with stress as he tried to explain a situation that had no precedent in their emergency protocols. The closer Elena got to the dragon and her child, the stronger the energy readings became. Her suit's radiation detectors were going crazy, but, strangely, she felt no ill effects. If anything, she felt energized, as if the alien energies were somehow compatible with her own biological systems. The mother dragon carefully, gently, extended one massive claw toward Elena. Will you touch her? She asked, and Elena could hear the fear beneath the request. Will you let your life force mingle with hers, so that you might understand what poison courses through her quantum matrix? Elena didn't hesitate. She reached out and placed her gloved hand against the hatchling's side, feeling the weak flutter of its heartbeat through her suit's tactile sensors. The moment their energies touched, the world exploded into sensation. Elena found herself seeing through the hatchling's senses, experiencing existence as a being of living energy barely contained within a physical form. She felt the sickness too, a creeping darkness that was systematically shutting down the quantum processes that kept the creature alive. But, more than that, she understood its origin. The hatchling had been exposed to the emissions of a human antimatter reactor, the same type that powered their colony ship. The exotic particles produced by human technology were poison to the dragon's quantum-based physiology, slowly unraveling the very forces that held her cellular structure together. Elena jerked her hand back, gasping as her consciousness snapped back to her own body. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity's greatest technological achievement, the mastery of antimatter that had enabled them to travel between stars, was the very thing killing this alien child. I know what's wrong, Elena said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and revelation. And I think I know how to fix it. The dragon's great head tilted, hope and desperate need warring in her cosmic eyes. Speak, small healer. What poison burns away my daughter's light? Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything, not just for this dying creature, but for the relationship between humanity and whatever ancient civilization this dragon represented. The poison, Elena said quietly, is us. It's our technology, our antimatter emissions. But the cure is us too. The dragon's silence stretched for long moments, and Elena could feel the weight of alien intelligence processing this information. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement, if such a concept could apply to a being whose thoughts moved at the speed of starlight. How fitting, the dragon said, that the quick-lived species who brought death should also carry the seeds of life. Tell me, Elena Vasquez of the human colony, what would you have me do? Elena's heart pounded as she realized the dragon knew her name, had somehow pulled it from her thoughts during their brief contact. But there was no time to dwell on the implications of that revelation. Every second they delayed, the hatchling grew weaker. I need to take her back to our medical facility, Elena said. Our quantum stabilization technology can reverse the damage, but only if we can get her into a controlled environment where we can filter out the antimatter contamination. The request hung in the air between them like a live wire. Elena was asking this ancient, powerful being to trust her child to a species she had just met, using technology that had caused the problem in the first place. The dragon's response would determine not just the fate of one dying hatchling, but the future relationship between two species separated by millions of years of evolution and entirely different ways of understanding the universe. And Elena realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that this moment would be remembered as the day humanity truly announced itself to the wider galactic community. Not as conquerors or explorers, but as healers willing to risk everything to save a single alien life. The silence stretched for an eternity that lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Elena watched as the dragon's massive head turned toward the dying hatchling in her arms, those galactic eyes studying her child's fading light with the intensity of a star going supernova. When the dragon finally looked back at Elena, there was something new in her expression. Decision, terrible and absolute. "I will come with you," the dragon said, and her words shook dust from the crystal walls. "If my daughter is to die among strangers, she will not die alone." Commander Zhang's voice crackled urgently through Elena's calm. "Elena, whatever you're thinking, remember that thing is the size of a small building. Our medical bay can't possibly accommodate. Then, we make it work," Elena interrupted, her eyes never leaving the dragon's face. "We adapt. We improvise. We save lives. That's what we do." The dragon began to move, and Elena suddenly understood what it meant to witness the migration of mountains. Despite her immense size, the creature moved with a fluid grace that defied physics, her massive form seeming to flow rather than walk across the crystal floor. As she moved, the bioluminescent patterns in the cavern walls responded to her presence, creating waves of light that followed her like a living aurora. "My name," the dragon said as they began the journey toward the cavern entrance, "is Astroleth the Star Weaver, last mother of the quantum flame, guardian of the deep harmonies. But, in your brief tongue, you may call me Astral." Elena blinked in surprise. The casual way the ancient being had shortened her elaborate title suggested either tremendous humility or a remarkable ability to adapt to human social conventions. "How do you know about human naming customs? Your thoughts are like bright flames in the darkness," Astral replied, carefully navigating around a cluster of razor-sharp crystal formations. "When I touched your mind to share my daughter's pain, I learned much about your species. You are young, yes, but you burn with such intensity. Your entire civilization has compressed millions of years of development into mere millennia. It is impressive." They had reached the cavern entrance, where the tunnel leading to the surface stretched ahead of them like a throat of polished stone. Elena's team had been forced to use mining charges to widen several sections on their way down, but those openings would never accommodate Astral's massive form. "I cannot pass through these narrow ways," Astral said, studying the tunnel with obvious frustration. "The stone singers who carved these passages never imagined one of my kind would need to walk them." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. The mining equipment back at the colony could widen the tunnels, but that would take hours they didn't have. The hatchling's quantum coherence was degrading by the minute, and Elena could see new dark patches spreading across the small creature's scales like stains on starlight. "What if we didn't go through?" Elena said suddenly. "What if we went around?" Astral's great head tilted in confusion, and Elena felt a flutter of alien amusement in her mind. "I do not understand, small healer." Elena pointed toward the cavern ceiling, where natural fissures in the rock suggested geological weakness. "You're a being of living energy barely contained in physical form. Your species manipulates quantum forces instinctively. What if, instead of trying to squeeze through passages designed for smaller creatures, we create our own path?" Understanding dawned in Astral's cosmic eyes, and the temperature in the cavern spiked as her excitement affected the ambient energy levels. "You suggest I reshape the very stone itself?" "I suggest we do it together," Elena corrected. "Human mining technology combined with your quantum manipulation abilities. We could create a direct route to the surface in a fraction of the time it would take either of us working alone." Commander Zhang's voice erupted from Elena's calm with barely controlled panic. "Elena, are you seriously suggesting we help an unknown alien entity of massive destructive potential blast a hole through 300 meters of solid rock directly under our colony?" Elena looked at the dying hatchling, its breathing now so shallow she could barely detect movement in its tiny chest. Then, she looked at Astral, whose ancient eyes held a mixture of hope and desperate trust that transcended species barriers. "Yes," Elena said simply. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." The next 40 minutes redefined Elena's understanding of what was possible when two radically different technologies worked in harmony. Elena's mining charges, designed to fracture rock along precise geological fault lines, were guided by Astral's quantum senses that could detect structural weaknesses at the subatomic level. Where human explosives created rough openings, the dragon's energy manipulation smoothed and shaped the stone into perfect tunnels. As they worked, Elena began to understand the true scope of Astral's abilities. The dragon didn't simply blast through rock with brute force. Instead, she convinced the quantum bonds holding the stone together to reorganize themselves, persuading molecules to flow like water while maintaining their essential structural integrity. It was matter manipulation on a scale that made human nanotechnology look primitive. "Your people," Astral said as she guided another section of granite to flow aside like liquid. "They approach the universe as something to be conquered. We learned long ago to ask the cosmos to dance instead." Elena watched in fascination as the dragon's manipulation created a spiral pathway that curved gently upward, its walls inscribed with patterns that seemed to shift and move in her peripheral vision. "How long have your people existed?" "We were ancient when the first stars learned to sing," Astral replied, pausing to let Elena set the next series of charges. "We watched galaxies be born and die. We saw the first sparks of life kindle in the cosmic darkness and guided them toward consciousness. But we grew proud, small healer. We thought ourselves beyond the need for growth, for change." The final charges detonated, and suddenly, Elena could see sunlight streaming down through the opening above. The tunnel Astral had created emerged on a hillside less than a kilometer from the Colonial Medical Center, perfectly positioned for rapid transport while avoiding the populated areas of the settlement. "And now?" Elena asked as they began their ascent. "Now I place my child's life in the hands of a species barely older than a cosmic heartbeat," Astral said, and Elena could hear something like wonder in her voice. "Perhaps it is time for the ancient ones to learn from the young." They emerged into the brilliant afternoon sun of Kepler 442b, and Elena had to shield her eyes against the glare. But Astral seemed to drink in the stellar radiation like water, her scales brightening visibly as she absorbed energy from the system's twin suns. The medical center was a hive of activity. Dr. Ramirez had outdone himself, somehow managing to clear and sterilize the main cargo bay while simultaneously rigging a quantum stabilization field large enough to accommodate a creature of Astral size. Elena could see the entire colony's medical staff working frantically to prepare equipment that had never been designed for alien physiology. But as they approached the facility, Elena noticed something that made her heart race with new concern. The entire area was surrounded by colonial defense forces, their weapons trained not on any external threat, but on the approaching dragon. "Elena," Commander Zhang's voice came through her calm, tight with authority and barely suppressed fear. "I need you to understand something." The Colonial Council met in emergency session 15 minutes ago. They've classified this contact as a potential first contact scenario with unknown alien military capabilities. Elena felt Astral's massive presence beside her grow still, and she knew the dragon was reading the hostile intent in the human's electromagnetic signatures just as easily as Elena could read text on a page. "What does that mean?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "It means," Zhang said quietly, "that if that creature poses any threat to colonial security, we have authorization to neutralize it with extreme prejudice." Elena looked up at Astral, whose ancient eyes now held a sadness deeper than stellar night. The dragon spoke softly, her words meant only for Elena's mind. "It seems your people fear what they do not understand, just as mine once did. Perhaps we are not so different after all." "She's not a threat," Elena said into her calm, loud enough for the entire defense perimeter to hear. "She's a mother trying to save her dying child. And if we let fear drive our decisions here, if we choose violence over compassion, then we'll have thrown away the greatest opportunity for peaceful first contact in human history." Elena began walking toward the medical center, her arms cradling the dying hatchling, fully aware that Astral was following behind her. She could feel the tension in the air, could see fingers hovering over triggers, could sense the moment balanced on a knife's edge between cooperation and catastrophe. "Stand down," came a new voice over the comm system. Colonial Governor Sarah Chun had apparently arrived to take personal control of the situation. "All defense units, stand down immediately. Dr. Vasquez is to be given full access to medical facilities." Elena felt some of the tension bleed out of the air, but she knew they weren't safe yet. Fear was a powerful force, especially when confronted with something as alien and magnificent as Astral. It would only take one nervous guard, one misunderstood gesture, to turn this miracle into a tragedy. As if sensing Elena's thoughts, Astral began to sing. The sound that emerged from the dragon's throat was unlike anything in human experience. It wasn't music in any sense Elena understood, but rather a harmony that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of matter itself. The sound wrapped around them like invisible silk, and Elena watched in amazement as the hostile body language of the surrounding soldiers began to relax. "What is she doing?" Governor Chen asked over the comm. Elena smiled as understanding dawned. "She's singing a lullaby," she said. "Not for her daughter, but for us. She's trying to calm our fears." By the time they reached the medical bay, the entire defense perimeter had lowered their weapons. Several of the guards were openly staring in wonder at the magnificent creature who moved among them with such impossible grace, her song weaving patterns of peace in the air around them. Dr. Ramirez met them at the entrance to the cargo bay, his eyes wide with excitement and terror in equal measure. "Elena, I've never seen quantum readings like these. That creature exists in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously, and her offspring's cellular structure is composed of matter states we don't even have names for." Elena handed the hatchling to her colleague, watching as his expression changed from scientific fascination to compassionate concern as he felt the tiny creature's labored breathing. "Can you save her?" "I don't know," Ramirez admitted. "But I'm damn well going to try." As the human medical team worked frantically to stabilize the alien child, Astral positioned herself at the edge of the quantum field, her massive form crackling with barely contained energy as she watched strangers fight to save her daughter's life. Elena stood beside her, two beings from completely different evolutionary paths united by a single, universal truth. Love transcends all boundaries, even those between species separated by millions of years and light years of space. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Astral had called herself the last mother of her kind, and the implications of that title were only now beginning to sink in. What had happened to the rest of the dragons? And what would the galaxy look like when other species learned that humanity had successfully made contact with beings who remembered the birth of stars? The quantum stabilization field hummed with energy that made Elena's teeth ache, but she couldn't bring herself to step away from the observation window. Inside the field, Dr. Ramirez and his team worked with desperate precision, their movements orchestrated around the tiny alien form that lay motionless on the specialized treatment table. 3 hours had passed since they'd brought Astral's daughter to the medical center. 3 hours of the most complex xenobiology anyone had ever attempted. Elena watched as Ramirez carefully adjusted the quantum resonance frequencies, trying to find the exact harmonic pattern that would stabilize the hatchling's cellular matrix without causing a cascade failure. "Quantum coherence is at 12% and falling," announced Dr. Yates from her position at the monitoring station. "We're losing her." Elena felt Astral's massive presence shift beside her, the dragon's emotional distress causing fluctuations in the ambient electromagnetic field that made the medical equipment hiccup and recalibrate. For all her ancient wisdom and cosmic power, Astral was ultimately just a mother watching her child die, helpless to intervene. "Wait," Ramirez said suddenly, his voice tight with concentration. "I'm seeing something in her quantum signature. Elena, remember what you said about the antimatter contamination? What if we're approaching this backwards?" Elena pressed closer to the observation window, her trained eye studying the readouts streaming across the monitors. "What do you mean?" "We've been trying to purge the exotic particles from her system," Ramirez explained, his hands flying over the control interfaces. "But what if those particles have become integrated into her quantum matrix? What if removing them would cause more damage than leaving them in place?" Understanding struck Elena like lightning. "You're talking about adaptation rather than elimination." "Exactly. Instead of fighting the contamination, we help her body learn to process it safely." Ramirez looked up at the observation window, his eyes meeting Elena's through the transparent barrier. "But I'll need Astral's help. Her understanding of quantum biology is millions of years ahead of ours." Elena turned to the massive dragon beside her, whose cosmic eyes were fixed on her dying child with laser focus. "Astral, Dr. Ramirez needs you to share your knowledge of quantum cellular manipulation. Not just surface thoughts, but deep biological understanding." Astral's great head turned toward Elena, and there was something haunting in her expression. "To share such knowledge would be to open my mind completely to your colleague. He would see not just the science, but everything. My memories, my people's history, the reason why I am the last mother." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. There was pain in Astral's voice, old wounds that hadn't healed despite the passage of cosmic ages. What aren't you telling us? Astral was silent for a long moment, her attention returning to the child fighting for life inside the quantum field. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of civilizations. My people called themselves the Astroleth, the Star Weavers. We were born from the quantum foam at the universe's dawn, beings of living energy who learned to shape matter and time according to our will. For millions of years, we spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, nurturing young species toward consciousness and wisdom. Elena listened, fascinated, as Astral painted a picture of a civilization so ancient and advanced that human language barely had words to describe it. The Star Weavers had been teachers and protectors, guiding countless species through their evolutionary development before stepping back to let them find their own paths among the stars. But power, even benevolent power, corrupts in time, Astral continued, her voice heavy with regret. We grew proud. We began to believe that our guidance was not just helpful, but necessary. That younger species could not be trusted to develop without our direct intervention. The medical equipment beeped urgently, and Elena saw Ramirez shaking his head in frustration as another treatment approach failed. They were running out of time and running out of options. We became tyrants dressed as benefactors, Astral said, seeming not to notice the crisis unfolding in the medical bay. We suppressed technologies we deemed dangerous, altered the development of species we considered too aggressive, made decisions about the fate of entire worlds based on our own ancient prejudices. Elena began to understand the terrible irony of their situation. Other species rebelled. The Galactic Confederation, Astral confirmed, an alliance of younger races who had grown beyond their need for our guidance. They came to us with a simple demand: step back and let the galaxy choose its own path. We refused. The quantum field flickered, and Elena's heart clenched as she saw the hatchling's life signs spike erratically before dropping to barely detectable levels. Inside the treatment bay, Dr. Ramirez was shouting orders, but Elena could see the growing desperation in his movements. The war lasted 1,000 of your years, Astral continued, her voice becoming distant as memory claimed her. In the end, we lost not because our enemies were stronger, but because we were wrong. The younger races fought with a creativity and innovation we had forgotten in our ancient wisdom. They developed weapons that turned our own quantum manipulation abilities against us. Elena watched in horror as the hatchling's quantum coherence began to collapse completely, the exotic matter of her cellular structure unraveling at the molecular level. Astral, we need that knowledge now, or your daughter dies. The Confederation did not genocide us, Astral said, her massive head turning toward Elena with eyes that held cosmic sadness. They did something far more elegant. They exiled us to a parallel dimensional space, accessible only through quantum tunnels that close and shift randomly. Most of my people are lost there still, unable to return to normal space-time. Elena felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. But you found a way back. I am the only one who refused exile, Astral said simply. The only Star Weaver who chose to remain in normal space when the dimensional barriers were erected. I have spent the last 3 million years in isolation, watching the galaxy grow and change without my people's influence. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. You're not just the last mother. You're the last Star Weaver in our entire dimensional space. Astral nodded, her attention returning to her dying child. I thought my people's legacy would die with me. But then, in the depths of space where I had hidden to lay my egg in solitude, I discovered something impossible. The quantum radiation from your antimatter drives had begun to interact with my reproductive biology. My daughter is not pure Star Weaver. She is something new, a hybrid being who carries both my people's quantum nature and an adaptation to your technology. Elena's scientific mind raced with the implications. If the hatchling survived, she would represent the bridge between two radically different evolutionary paths. A being who could exist in both quantum and normal space, who could interact with both Star Weaver consciousness and human technology. That's why the contamination didn't just kill her, Elena breathed. It's actually part of her genetics now. Yes, Astral said, and there was wonder in her voice. She is what my people could become, if we learned to adapt rather than dominate. If we chose cooperation over control. Inside the medical bay, alarms were blaring as the hatchling's life signs flatlined. Elena saw Ramirez step back from the treatment table, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Astral, Elena said urgently. If you share your knowledge with Dr. Ramirez, can you save her? The dragon's cosmic eyes met Elena's, and in them she saw not the ancient alien who had watched galaxies be born, but simply a mother facing the loss of her child. I can save her, Astral said quietly. But, to do so, I must share not just my knowledge, but my very essence. The process will link my quantum consciousness to Dr. Ramirez permanently. He will become something new, a hybrid like my daughter, human in body, but carrying Star Weaver knowledge in his mind. Elena looked through the observation window at her colleague, who was staring at the motionless hatchling with anguish written across his face. She thought about the choice she was about to ask him to make, and about the implications for humanity's future. Dr. Ramirez, Elena said into the comm system. We have a way to save her, but it requires a permanent change to your neural structure. You'll be linked to Astral's consciousness for the rest of your life. Ramirez looked up at the observation window, his eyes finding Elena's through the barrier. For a moment, she saw him weighing the implications, considering what it would mean to become something no longer entirely human. Then, his gaze shifted to the dying alien child on the treatment table, and his expression hardened with resolve. Do it, he said simply. What followed was beyond anything Elena had ever witnessed. Astral placed one massive claw against the quantum field barrier, and suddenly, the air itself seemed to come alive with cascading energy patterns. Elena watched as streams of pure consciousness flowed from the dragon into the medical bay, wrapping around Dr. Ramirez like living light. Ramirez gasped, his back arching as alien knowledge flooded into his human mind. But instead of being overwhelmed, Elena saw understanding bloom across his features as cosmic wisdom integrated with human innovation. His hands moved with newfound certainty, adjusting the quantum field parameters with an intuitive grasp of forces he had never studied but now somehow comprehended completely. The exotic particles that had been killing the hatchling were carefully redirected, transformed from poison into nourishment, woven into her developing quantum matrix as a natural part of her hybrid physiology. Elena watched in amazement as the hatchling's life signs stabilized, then strengthened. Color began to return to her scales, a shifting aurora that spoke of successful integration between Starweaver genetics and human-influenced quantum adaptation. It's working, Ramirez said, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. When he turned to look at Elena, his eyes held depths that spoke of minds linked across species barriers. She's not just surviving. She's evolving. The hatchling stirred, her tiny form uncoiling as strength returned to her limbs. When she opened her eyes, Elena saw intelligence there, ancient and young simultaneously, carrying the wisdom of the Star Weavers and the adaptability of a species born from the interaction between two civilizations. Astral's song of joy filled the medical bay, her voice harmonizing with frequencies that made the quantum field sing in response. Tears of liquid starlight fell from her cosmic eyes, but these were tears of relief and wonder rather than grief. My daughter lives, Astral whispered, her mental voice touching every human mind in the facility with gentle warmth. And more than that, she is proof that evolution never ends, that life always finds a way to grow beyond the boundaries we set for it. 6 months later, Elena stood in the newly constructed Quantum Biology Research Center, watching as the hatchling, now named Luna by the human colonists who had helped raise her, played with a group of human children in the specially designed habitat that bridged normal and quantum space. Luna had grown rapidly, her hybrid physiology allowing her to shift between energy and matter states at will. She could communicate telepathically like her mother, but she also spoke human languages with the curiosity of a child discovering the world. She was living proof that cooperation between species could create something greater than either could achieve alone. Dr. Ramirez approached, his enhanced consciousness allowing him to perceive reality in ways that had revolutionized human understanding of quantum mechanics. The knowledge he had gained from Astral had led to breakthroughs in everything from faster-than-light communication to dimensional engineering. The Galactic Confederation wants to establish diplomatic relations, Ramirez reported, his dual nature allowing him to serve as translator between human and Starweaver modes of thought. Apparently, news of successful peaceful first contact has spread throughout their network. They're interested in humanity's approach to xenobiology. Elena smiled as she watched Luna demonstrate her shape-shifting abilities to a delighted group of children, her forms flowing between dragon-like configurations and patterns of pure light that danced through the air like living aurora. And Astral? Elena asked. She's been contacted by other Star Weavers who managed to escape the dimensional exile over the centuries, Ramirez said, his enhanced senses detecting quantum communications invisible to normal human perception. They're curious about Luna, about the possibility of evolution rather than isolation. Through the habitat's transparent walls, Elena could see Astral herself, no longer the last of her kind, but the first of something new. The ancient dragon had become an ambassador between the human colony and the slowly growing population of Star Weavers who were choosing to emerge from hiding. But, more than that, she had become a symbol of something humanity was just beginning to understand. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, populated by species with millions of years of knowledge and experience. Humanity's role in that cosmic community wouldn't be determined by military might or technological superiority, but by their willingness to extend compassion across species barriers. As Elena watched Luna teach a human child how to perceive quantum fluctuations with her enhanced senses, she realized that this was just the beginning. The weeping mother dragon who had offered her dying child to strangers had unknowingly given humanity something far more precious than first contact. She had given them a future where diversity of thought and form was not just tolerated, but celebrated, where the differences between species became sources of strength rather than division, where a mother's love could bridge gaps measured in millions of years and light years of space. In the end, Elena reflected, that might be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their technology or their adaptability, but their unwavering belief that every life, no matter how alien, was worth saving. It was a simple philosophy, but one that had the power to transform civilizations. And, as Luna's laughter echoed through the research center, mixing human joy with Star Weaver song harmonies, Elena knew that the galaxy would never be the same.